I'm going to wind up here and finish. But I wanted to spend some time to make sure the American people knew what was in this bill. And I think once they really know what's in this bill, they're going to reject it out of hand. Let me read for you some of the things that are in this bill. The biggest earmark in history is in this bill. There's $2 billion in this bill to build a coal plant with zero emissions. That would be great, maybe, if we had the technology. But the greatest thoughts and brains in the world sitting at MIT say we don't have the technology yet to do that. Why would we build a $2 billion power plant that we don't have the technology for, that we know they'll come back and ask for another $2 billion and another $2 billion and another $2 billion, when we could build a demonstration project that might cost $150 or $200 million? There's nothing wrong with having coal-fired plants that don't produce pollution. I'm not against that. But to spend $2 billion on unproven, even the Washington Post said the technology isn't there, it's a boondoggle. Why would we do that? We just eliminated tonight a $246 million payback for the large movie studios in Hollywood. We're going to spend $88 million to study whether we ought to buy a new icebreaker for the Coast Guard. You know what? The Coast Guard needs a new icebreaker. Why do we need to spend $88 million? They have 2 icebreakers now that they could retrofit and fix and come up with equivalent to what they need today, and not spend the $1 billion that they're going to come back and ask for on another icebreaker. So why would we spend $88 million doing that? We're going to spend $448 million to build the Department of Homeland Security a new building. We have $1.3 trillion worth of empty buildings right now. And because it's been blocked in Congress, we can't sell them, we can't raise them, we can't do anything. But yeah. But we're going to spend money on a new building here in Washington. We're going to spend another $248 million for new furniture for that building. $250 million for new furniture. What about the furniture that the Department of Homeland Security has now? This is tough times. Should we be buying new furniture? How about using what we got? That's what a family would do. They'd use what they had. They wouldn't go out and spend $248 million on furniture. How about buying $600 million worth of hybrid vehicles? You know what I'd say? Right now, times are tough. I'd rather Americans have new cars than federal employees have new cars. What's wrong with the cars we got? Dumping $600 million worth of used vehicles on the used vehicle market right now is one of the worst things we could do. Instead, we're going to spend $600 million buying new cars for federal employees. There's $400 million in here to prevent STDs. You know, I've got a lot of experience on that. I've delivered 4,000 babies. We don't need to spend $400 million on STDs. What we need to do is properly educate about the infection rates and the effectiveness of methods of prevention. And that doesn't take a penny more. You can write that on one piece of paper and teach every kid in this country. But we don't need to spend $400 million on it. It's not a priority right now. $1.4 billion for rural waste disposal programs, that might even be somewhat stimulative. New sewers, that might create jobs. $150 million for Smithsonian Museum. Tell me how that helps get us out of a recession. Tell me how that's a priority. Is that would the average American think that's a priority, that we ought to be mortgaging our kids' future to spend another $150 million at the Smithsonian? How about $1 billion for the 2010 census? Just so everybody knows, the census is so poorly managed that the census this year is going to cost twice, in 2010, is going to cost twice what it cost 10 years ago. And we wasted $800 million on a contract because it was no bid that didn't perform. Nobody got fired, no competitive bidding, and we blew $800 million. We have $75 million for smoking cessation activities, which probably is a great idea, but we just passed a bill, the S-chip bill, that we need to get 21 million more Americans smoking to be able to pay for that bill. That doesn't make sense. $200 million for public computer centers at community colleges. Since when is a community college in my state a recipient of federal largesse? Is that really our responsibility? I mean, did we talk with Dell and Hewlett-Packard and say, how do we make you all do better? Is there not a market force that could make that better? Will we actually buy on a true competitive bid? No, because there's nothing that requires competitive bidding in anything in this bill. Nothing that requires. One of President Obama's things that he said he was going to mandate at the federal government, competitive. There's no competitive bidding in this bill at all. $10 million to inspect canals in urban areas. Well, that'll put 10 or 15 people to work. Is that a priority for us right now? $6 billion to turn federal buildings into green buildings. That's really a priority versus somebody getting a job outside of Washington? A job that actually produces something, that actually increases wealth? How about $500 million for state and local fire stations? So where do you find in the Constitution that us paying for local fire stations within our realm of prerogatives? None of it competitively bid. Not a grant program. $1.2 billion for youth activities. Who does that employ? What does that mean? How about $88 million for renovating the public health service building? You know, if we could sell half of the $1.3 trillion worth of properties we've had, we could take care of every federal building requirement and backlog that we have. $412 million for CDC buildings and property. We just spent billions on a brand new center and headquarters for CDC. Why would we, is that a priority? Building another government building? Instead of building something that if we're going to spend $412 million on building a building, let's build one that's going to produce something, that's going to give us something. $850 million for that most efficient Amtrak that hadn't made any money since 1976 and continues to have $2 to $3 billion a year in subsidies. Here's one of my favorites. $75 million to construct a new security training facility for State Department security officers where we have 4 other facilities already available to train them. But it's not theirs. They want theirs. And oh, by the way, it's going to be in West Virginia. Wonder how that got there. So we're going to build a new training facility that duplicates 4 others that we already have that could easily do what we need to do, but because we've got a stimulus package, we're going to add in oink pork. $200 million in funding for lease, not buying, lease of alternative energy vehicles on military installations. And then we're going to bail out the states on Medicaid. Total all the health programs in this, we're going to transfer $150 billion out of the private sector and we're going to move it to the federal government. You talk about backdooring national health care. Henry Waxman's got to be smiling big today. He wants a single-payer government-run health care system. And we're going to move another $150 billion to the federal government from the private sector. We're going to eliminate fees on loans from the Small Business Administration. You know what that does? That pushes productive capital to unproductive projects. It's exactly the wrong thing to do. $160 million to the Job Corps program, but not for jobs and not to put more people in the Job Corps, but to construct, alter, or repair buildings. We're going to spend $524 million for information technology upgrades that the Appropriation Committee claims will create 388 jobs. Now, do the math on that, and that's $1.5 million a job. Don't you love the efficiency of Washington thinking? We're going to create $79 billion in additional money for the states, a, quote, slush fund, to bail out states, provide billions of dollars for education costs. How many of you think that will ever go away? Once the state education programs get $79 billion over 2 years, do you think that'll ever go away? The cry and hue of taking our money away, even though it was a stimulus, even though it was supposed to be limited, it'll never go away. So we'll continue putting that forward till our kids have their grandkids of their own. $47 billion for a variety of energy programs that are primarily focused on renewable energy. I'm fine with spending that, but we ought to get something for it. There ought to be metrics. There are no metrics. It's a pie in the sky saying we'll throw some money at it. Let me just conclude by saying we're at a seminal moment in our country. We will either start living within the confines of realism and responsibility, or we will blow it and we will create the downfall of the greatest nation that ever lived. This bill is the start of that downfall. To abandon a market-oriented society and transfer it to a Soviet-style, government-centered, bureaucratic-run and mandated programs is the thing that will put the stake in the heart of freedom in this country. I hope American people know what's in this bill. I'm doing everything I can to make sure they know. But more importantly, I hope somebody's listening that will treat the pneumonia that we're faced with today, which is the housing and mortgage markets. It doesn't matter how much money we spend in this bill. It is doomed to failure unless we fix that problem first. Failing that, we will go down in history as the Congress who undermined the future and vitality of this country. Let it not be so. Let it not be so. Mr. President, I appreciate the indulgence of you and the staff. With that, I yield the floor and notice the absence of a quorum.